So you should see record pop up. And with that, you should be allowed to share your screen, Chad, if you want to. If you don't want to, that's fine. And I'm going to turn this Zoom call on how to buy a tractor over to you.
Okay, I appreciate that. Let me see if I can get these slides up here.
Perfect.
Put a few slides together for you guys. Let's see. Does that show up?
Yes, it does.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. So, well, thanks you guys for actually inviting me to talk about it. I mean, this is we feel it's a good opportunity. We love to talk equipment anytime, all day, all night, anytime that we possibly can get the opportunity that people will want to listen. we love to talk about equipment. So, just introduce myself. I'm the president and managing director of the Akana Group. I'm a citizen of Choctaw Nation. If you guys would like my contact information, you can take a picture of that little QR code right there, and it'll give you my phone, email, etc., all of our contact information. So we put this together here real quick. We're going to do a little giveaway for the folks that attended. We're going to run a raffle. So for this toolbox, but I do have two caveats that I have to listen. One, if you are a government employee, you'll be ineligible. We're a government contractor, so it'll take about 6 months worth of paperwork to get you at the toolbox. And the other one is that the toolbox does not come with the tools. But if you again would if you'd like to enter the drawing there for these, we're going to give it to just this group. We've got 2 of them to give away. So if you take a camera shot there and enter in your information, and we'll get some details from you on the winner, and then we'll ship it out to you. They work really good on the back of UTVs. I'll just say that. So real briefly, just a little bit about Akana. As I mentioned before, we specialize in equipment. We represent a lot of different brands, a lot of different manufacturers, but our flagship brand is John Deere. Especially with John Deere's, the program that we work with John Deere is really about trying to bridge the gap for indigenous farmers, both at the tribal and at the independent or at the individual operator or the individual farm level, trying to bridge the gap to access to equipment. So we've got several programs that we work with specifically with tribes or tribal operators that try to help get them access to equipment, not just the equipment, but also the service support, a pipeline to the manufacturer to allow, I don't know if you guys heard my conversation with Dr. Johnson there before, but we want to get out there and actually look at his program. We want to see some of those implements that he's developed there, that they have that unique way, or he calls it the correct way of planting corn. So the name Akana is a Choctaw name, it means ally, and that's what we live. So we try to be a friend, be a partner with our customers, and we just appreciate the opportunity to sit here and talk about all this equipment. So that being said, I think since it's recorded, you guys can go back. If everybody got a picture of that, to please enter so we can get these things shipped out, and we can get them off my desk, and so we can get them out of there to you guys. So I was first approached. Well, let me stop there. Does anybody have any questions? I can't see the chat box, but if somebody would stop me if they see something in there that I need to address, please post it in there, and I'll address it as we move along.
Okay, sure, Chad, and I'm watching the participants too, so if anybody raises their hand, I'll let you know.
Perfect, thank you. So when I was asked to give the presentation, just to kind of give you a little foreshadowing of what we're going to talk about, I was asked to talk about smaller, compact utility tractors, not the big ag, not the big row crops, but the ones that have a lot of different options, a lot of different utilizations, a lot of different implements. So anywhere between 20 horsepower to 250 horsepower, and then also talk about the used applications, right? What would go into the decision making of deciding to buy new versus used? And I'll go into that. We're in a very unique position right now in the market, especially with used equipment, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. And when you're looking at getting into buying a tractor, the OEMs, whether it's Kubota or Case or John Deere, they are really, really good at marketing. So if you walk in there, you can be almost overwhelmed especially in the subcompact or the special utility type tractor market. I mean, whether it's Kubota or it's John Deere or it's Case, Farmall, there's a lot of different options that can take you a lot of different places. But what I like to look at is really two elements, right? And the two elements is, what will you use it for, and how much time would you like to take to do that task? And if you notice, I don't put cost in there, because I think cost, if you look at those two on a linear scale, the cost is an output of how those two functions work together. You know, what will you be using it for, and how much time would you like to take to do those jobs? And then the price point kind of falls in between of those two as the output of those two functionalities. So when we're looking at qualifying a tractor purchase and what you're going to use it for, obviously we start with acreage, right? You look at how much land you're looking to utilize it for. Is it under 10 acres? Is it more than 10 acres? Are you going to have hills, the topography, you know, that you're working in? Are you going to be trying to mow? Do you need loaders? You know, you're getting into what are those tasks that you're actually looking for to accomplish. Are you going to use them to carry hay? Do you need grapples? Do you need a box blade because you've got a long driveway or a gravel driveway? Getting into the actual application of what is it you're trying to accomplish with your land, right? And so, and even looking at that in a 12-month cycle, you know, in spring is going to be different than the summer, and the fall and the winter, you're going to have very, very different applications or uses for that piece of equipment. We always start to say, okay, well, it's land management. Are you going to have a mowing application, right? Is it something that you're going to mow fields, or is it a finish mower type application? Are you going to be looking to mow the areas around your house or your building, something like that, more finishing, or is it something you're going to be pulling a brush off, something in the back? Moving the bucket, are you going to need a loader, the loader capacity that you're going to have? Are you going to need is it rocks? Is it mulch? Is it feed? The different attachments that may go into those stuff. So we like to sit down and actually look at what is the land utilization for that particular unit, especially in the subcompact tractor and the utility tractor range, just because they have so many different applications and so many different uses that they can utilize those. So when we begin to sit down, we start and we look at that. So, okay, we start to get them qualified. Are you going to be utilizing mowing? Yes, no. Where are you going to be mowing? Finishing mowers, or are you going to be brush hogging, 10 acres or greater? Are you going to need a loader? Is it going to be heavy load work? Are you going to be loading? You're going to be loading feed or corn? Or are you just doing basic gravel, maybe for your roads, things like maybe mulch, something like that? Are you going to need load leveling? Do you need an automatic load leveling? Are you comfortable with utilizing the loader that doesn't need the automatic load leveling that actually keeps your level loaded as you lift up and drive around? You don't have to manually do that. So we go in and we look at and we sit down and we try to qualify what is the task that you're trying to achieve. And then you get into, okay, well, how much time are you going to need to do those tasks? How much time are you willing to utilize or to give in your day to utilize that task? So, okay, let's say we've identified a small 40 horsepower tractor, 30 horsepower tractor, 20 horsepower tractor, whatever it may be. Then we begin to look at the implements and the attachments that would go along with that. Is it box blades? Is it a brush hog? Is it the loader? The type of mowing that you may need? Are you going to be, putting in a small planter on the back of it? Are you going to have spraying applications? What are those elements that you would need to go in there? And then you develop implements in terms of the hydraulic capacity for those. Do you need, different hydraulic valves, for example, on the loader, if you're going to need a grapple, the hydraulic implements on the back of it, the hitch components on the back of it to utilize those type of the implements that you're looking to utilize in your farm or your land. One thing that I think is also important when you get into loaders often will increase the horsepower, will move you up based on your loader work, will move you up in a horsepower and a product category when you're looking at the compact utility tractors. Just based on the amount of weight that you need to lift with that loader can move you up really quickly. When you start looking at loaders and capacities, that's just something that we look at. Loader, again, the ballasting is so important when you're looking at about whether it's John Deere or Kubota or any of those other ones. When you lifetime lifting, are you able to, as soon as you hit the button, as soon as you pull the lever, does that load go up, or does it have to take time to develop the power before? Is there a lag in it? I think that's very important when you're looking at it. Oftentimes we'll get into some discussions with, not to spin on the John Deere, we brought other tractors and they said, well, they've got a higher loading capacity. I said, well, if you look at it, can you lift immediately? No, or do you have to wait for it to pull up? Or how high does that mean? I mean, the ballasting of those loaders, you may only be able to lift it 3 feet off the ground. You may not be able to lift it at high load for that weight. So going into those actual elements of what you're going to be needing it for is very, very important. And then actually breaking down those implements to make sure you've got the right machine that will cover your capacity, whether it's lifting or implement utilization, the hydraulic utilization, and of that machine. We often get asked about two-wheel drive versus four-wheel drive. And it goes back to your land topography, right? Two-wheel drive tractors, I think personally they're tough, just because of the lay of the land. If you're wanting to go up hills, even in the flattest parts of the country, going up hills, coming down hills, that four-wheel drive, again, with seasonal weather changes, just to me is a lot better utilization machine, gives you a lot more capabilities from an operator standpoint. Turning radius, especially looking at compact utility tractors in the kind of small category, they're going to be around a lot of different buildings, going in and out of gates and corrals, and some may be actually operating inside of a let's say a chicken house or something like that may actually go in and drag out stuff. Does the machine have optimal turning radius to actually move around the areas that you need to operate? Landscape, I talked about that. Hills, valleys can really affect the amount of torque that is needed, especially when you're pulling implements. And when you're looking at your implement categories, is it a new tractor purchase, used tractor purchase? Do you already have implements on hand that you own? How is the PTO? Is it the 540? Is it 1,000? Are you going to have the ability to connect with both of those? Some tractors, like in this picture here, we've got one that flips. So it doesn't matter what you have, you can pull it out and flip it around from 540 to 1,000. But I think that's really important. You'd hate to buy a tractor and then take it home and not be able to operate the implement because you don't have the right, the RPM, you don't have the right attachment there for the RPM for the PTO. Sway bars, like in the picture of the back. Sway bars versus the buckle attachments. To me, sway bars have a lot more advantageous utilization versus the buckles. The sway bars can allow rigid versus flexibility. If you're, pulling an implement in the field, mowing, bush hogging, whatever it may be, you run into a stump, you really want the ability for that machine to be that implement to pop up and just go over that. However, if you've got an auger on the back, you don't want that sway. You want the ability to dial it in and make it more rigid so it can press down on it. Sway bars, I think, have a much more advantage than the buckle attachments that you see in a lot of tractors. And I think one of the biggest is the actual control station. When you're actually looking at acquiring a tractor or looking at a tractor, is set in it and really see how it fits with you. Are you comfortable with the pedal placements? Single versus dual. The dual John Deere has, and some of the other OEMs will have that single hydrostatic pedal that it's one pedal that you push in the front for forward, or push in the back, or you push in the back to go backwards. Are you comfortable with that, right? Or do you like more of the dual pedal action that gives you more space or more use of ease? Where are the controls for the PTO? Where are the controls for the hydraulics? Where are the controls for the loader? Are they easily reachable? Or is the dials and everything there on the control station in front, are they easily readable? Do you have enough visibility setting in that control center? If you do have a cab, right? New cabs, the newer cabs are great because they've really tried to take more of an ergonomic visibility standpoint that you can see a lot better than they have in some of the cabs in the past. And that's across the board of all different type of manufacturers. But that's where I really like to get people when they are looking to buy a tractor. We can talk about utilization. We can talk about PTOs and horsepower and implements. But if you are not comfortable in that seat, it's going to be really difficult to get out there and do that work. So we really try to get people to sit in the seat, touch the controls, touch the machine, see how it feels when they're utilizing the controls, and get that type of feedback, right? I really like this machine, but I don't really like the seat. I need a little bit bigger back. Okay, we can do that. I don't like that. Is there any type of air suspension? Yes, we can do that. But we really like to get them into that seat point to say, okay, how do you handle sitting here? Are you comfortable with the controls? And it may be a first-time tractor buyer, right? That's often, they may have only had a riding lawnmower or a lawn tractor or something like that. And it's very different. It can be kind of intimidating, especially if it's a new tractor purchase, right? You've got a lot of different buttons and a lot of different options, but how does it feel when you sit inside of it? How does it feel to go forward? How does it feel to go back? How does it feel to increase the speed? How does it feel, the sound of the engine as it's pulling implements and engaging in those type of things? So I kind of wanted to, if there's any questions on the new, I'd like to stop now and see if there's anything that was there to answer. Nothing? Okay. Well, I like this kind of comparison because we start looking at the used equipment model. And on the left is the new John Deere X Series. It can harvest 30 acres an hour, but it still does the same job as the implement on the right. The implement on the right may take you 2 weeks to do 30 acres with by hand, but they both complete the job. And that's what I had mentioned at the beginning was, what is the job that you're trying to accomplish and how much time are you willing to put into it? And that still plays into the used equipment categories as well as we get into that. Now, I will give the caveat, as I mentioned before, used equipment right now is skyrocketing in value and it's very hard to find. And the reason is that, and it's not one OEM, it's being affected by anybody that manufactures. I think even if you've driven by your car lots, you don't see a lot of new trucks out there right now. The impact of supply chain disruptions due to COVID has created a new equipment availability gap. New equipment right now is very difficult just because of the supply chain disruptions, not necessarily because of the extra production, but a lot of the subcontract third-party suppliers that feed into these OEMs. And so with that, used equipment has significantly skyrocketed. So I don't want to talk about price new versus used, because right now used equipment can almost be at the same price point as new equipment just because of the market that we're in right now. Which I'm sure if you guys have seen or gone by any of the brick and mortar dealers, you've seen it's very barren. Even the automotive truck dealers are very barren, and that's part of it right now. Is the supply chain disruptions? They haven't caught up with new equipment, and the industry has turned to used equipment, and it's just skyrocketed with the price points. So, like I was saying, again, same thing with the used equipment. What will I use it for? How much time will I need to complete the task? Just like the sickle versus the combine, they both complete the same task. One can do it in an hour. One will take 2 or 3 weeks to complete. So in looking at a used equipment purchase, are you a first-time tractor buyer? Or are you adding to current equipment? Is it something that you have implements on hand that you need to make sure that the hydraulics and the PTO match the tractor that you're looking for? Or is it a first-time tractor buyer and you're just starting to get into it and you want to look at, okay, I'm going to get me a tractor. I don't want to go new. I'd like to get a used. I think a used would fit my projects better. Maybe I have limited utilization throughout the year, but I do need a tractor. The times that I do need it, I do need a tractor. So we look at the hours on the machine, right? Is the hours in the machine, how does it correlate hours to the manufactured scheduled maintenance? Are you at the end of that? Are you in the middle of that? Is it, hey, you only got 100 hours left or 50 hours left and you're going to have to go through another overhaul? Hour placement is a very good starting point of that machine when you're looking at it. The machine maintenance, is there a record of those machine maintenance, oil changes, fluid changes, things like that, that you would look at the machine? Does it have accurate records? Because you actually see that this owner previously, or the multiple owners previously, has taken care of that machine. Have they looked at it? Have they looked after it? Have they changed oil? Have they recorded that? What's the maintenance history that goes into it? Also the PTO. I mean, that's when you really get into, is make sure, especially some of the older machines, will it work with the implements that you're wanting to utilize right now? Is it something that does it have the hydraulic attachments and the controls in the back that will work with the machines that you have now, or you're looking to buy? Maybe you're going to look at a farm auction or something like that. How do those two go together? That becomes really important. Tires is a big expense on used equipment. If you're going to have to replace the tires, that could be a couple $1,000s in some of these units to get new tires on these machines, on a used machine. How does that play into it? Are the tires used? You're going to get good work out of them, or you're going to have to change them out. That's an additional expense that you may not have accounted for, as well as the maintenance history. Most likely those used units aren't still under warranty. So you're going to have, are you comfortable with, oil changes and lubricants, and is it something that you're going to be comfortable in dealing with those type of things, versus a new equipment where you can pull the dealers in there and you can kind of tie it into the package with a new machine. Look at the engine fluids. Always look at the engine fluids. White, cloudy, you've got water, you've got some issues. If you've got a white, just like in a car, if you've got some cloudy oil, something's going on there. Something's not right. You look at all is it leaking hydraulic fluid? If you got some stains there, if you had some issues there, have they addressed those issues? Are you going to get the machine and you're going to have an axle problem? You're going to have a four-wheel drive engagement problem. A lot of those are clues that you can get when you're actually looking to evaluate that tractor. How does it, again, the maintenance work? Let's say there was an issue there and they did fix it, so that's actually recorded in the maintenance record. Do they have a record of that? Can they answer those questions on it? The servicing, especially on the used units, your location, the ability to get to a brick and mortar dealer or a service station, I think becomes very, much more important, especially because you're kind of getting into those longevities of those machines that's got quite a little hours on, quite a bit of hours on. So, or maybe you've got find a good one that's got low hours, and you've got a good program. Maybe it's still under a warranty program, and you can handle as you move into learning about the tractor or getting that used tractor to see where it's at, and then you're moving into more of a self-service maintenance and upkeep and things like that. So,
Chad, you do have a question in the chat, and it's from Michael Johnson, and it asks, when do you expect the market to change, new versus used?
I would say right now, 2020, we're sent through mid 2022, and a lot of it is tied to, and it sounds correct, chips, electric fuel injection engines. Anything that's got a chip in it is just, Deere is actually, and I'm speaking on behalf of Deere. Deere has actually canceled production on some units for 2021 just because they can't get the engines. Wow. So we're not expecting the market to change until summer of 2022, and it's not just John Deere; it's across the board. I mean, it is, and it's from little motors all the way up to our mining equipment, big asphalt state, those big equipment. It's a tough time right now, and there's long lead times, even. And the used equipment market has just skyrocketed. I mean, it's just, we can't get new until 2020. We have some, and I'll use big ag, big sprayers, big combines. We just sold two S770 combines over the weekend, and those are going to be delivered March of 2000. That's the projection of March of 2022. It's just.
So, and I think the other question is that the reservations are geographically isolated, and one of the big problems for these individuals is their location. Yes. So, do you have any comments or thoughts about, this particular comment says, they're 90 miles outside of Flagstaff?
Yes. So This is actually one of the histories of how Akana came to be Akana. Most if not all of our customers are in that same scenario. And so instead of the traditional brick and mortar dealers, when we sat with John Deere, our pitch to them was, let us create a program to come to them. It's a lot easier for us to come out to an end user, whether they're on a remote locations, it doesn't matter, than them loading up the piece of equipment. It might not even have a road, right? To get it back to a dealership, for them to come in and deal with the whole just back and forth of who does what and who pays for what. We come in and we set that service program on site based on the end user's needs. So it really is a tailored solution based on each producer. So if that producer is comfortable with XYZ, great. Is it a training issue? We can set up the training. Do they need maintenance, repair, overhaul, basic upkeep training? We can set that up with them. And then it becomes, okay, I will do 75, 90% of the training or work myself. And then for the other equipment, we will come out to them. We will arrange that to come out to them. That's a very good question, because we come across that even on the government side, working with, Bureau of Indian Education or Bureau of Indian Affairs or Indian Health Services. A lot of times when we're delivering, they can't even unload anything, right? They can't even take anything off a trailer. So our program that we do, we are set up to deal with that specifically. And there's two ways. Either we can train the trainer, right? So we have the individual operator that we can provide machine maintenance training, utilization training, basic upkeep training, as much training as they want. And that's actually for any machine that we sell, all the way to the big Birkin road stripping and all that big asphalt paving. We can do that, and setting up with that training for them to utilize, and then implement a program where, hey, I've got this, I can't operate. We'll get a service technician that will come out to you and work on it there. And that can go many different levels, where we're working, okay, well, I need to operate, so maybe we need to bring out a loaner for them to run while we're working on the machine. There's many different levels that we have in those, but we understand that from that remote location. That's actually one of the reasons that we exist, is trying to, as I mentioned, bridge that gap. That is one of the gaps that we've identified, is you may be 90, 100, 120, doesn't matter where you are, but we've got to find a way to get out to you versus you bringing that machine into a brick and mortar dealership. And the brick and mortar dealerships, they're great. They're just not set up to work like that. Just the way that they do their maintenance programs and their warranty programs, they're not set up to do that like we can directly, because our whole program is set up with Deere to do that. Well, actually, all of our OEMs that we work with, that is a prerequisite, is that we have to have the ability to have training of end users, as well as the ability to service those machines wherever they may be. So we tell people, even if you wanted to take this, I mean, we have machines that we ship to on the government side, to Africa, to Europe, to Asia. Locations doesn't matter to us from the service and support ability. That's how our program is set up. Does that answer your question?
I think it did answer their question. And then there's some more questions that we have, but it's related to financing. So I don't know if you have that in your PowerPoint to come up.
I don't have that in there. I just didn't. The financing is a very big issue. And part of the discount, the issue that we have with the discounted program is that we can't actually offer financing. So we've actually been working with the native CDFI and the native CDFI network, as well as the Native Ag Fund, and we've got a program. And so we're actually going to do a presentation next week to a group of tribal operators, independent operators, specifically around that. We know that the financing was, again, another gap. Great, we can sell discounted products, but if they can't pay, we can't finance it. We can't run through John Deere Financial. We're not going to get into sovereignty. We're just not going to do that. So we had to come up with another solution. And so the Native CDFI network is they've actually got a program together specifically for equipment, and that each one of the, and I'm not a finance guy, but the way it was explained to me is each one of the CDFIs they call it clubbing, so they can jump into this pool of financing opportunities for indigenous farmers, indigenous producers, to have access to that. So I can, if you send me an email, or if you give me your contact information, I can't see. I know Jen's on there. I don't know if you can see it. We can follow up because we've got over the next probably 30 days, we'll actually have a lot more information that will come out on it. Like I said, next week, we're actually doing a presentation to some travel operators up in Kansas. And one of the native CDFIs is actually going to attend and participate in that presentation. And it's specifically about financing of equipment.
Okay, and I think another question just popped up. Do you have to live in the state the CDFI is located in to take
No.
advantage of the program?
No, not from my understanding, no.
So that's perfect. So what you're telling me, Chad, is if they ran a quote through the Akana Group,
Yep.
and they said, yes, let's move forward, but we want to look at financing opportunities, you would ship that to the native CDFIs to see if they qualify for that.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
That's how that, and so this is something that we've probably been working on this for almost trying to figure out how do we actually close this. And we think we've got a solution with the CDFI network, and then with some help from the Native American Ag Fund to support this. Specifically, it's a pool of money that's set aside specifically for equipment. And that was one of the gaps was that we can't actually offer financing under our program, but the CDFIs, that they can do that, and then we're out of it, and then we can still process the equipment under the discounted program.
That's great news.
Because it's as again, this is something that is, even though we've been working with deer since 13, this is still something new that we're trying to figure out how to work in this space and how do we close those gaps, right? Like the remoteness, right? That was an issue. Financing, that was an issue. Getting out there that you actually have a native provider. We're actually the largest native-owned equipment dealer in the country. That somebody is a native. There actually is a native-owned deer dealership. Those are all been some of the things that we've been working on over the past since this whole thing started with deer. And like I said at the beginning, we represent a lot of different manufacturers, but the partnership with deer has been phenomenal. I mean, they have come, they've shown up. I had them a couple years ago there at Haskell University, and it wasn't the dealer, it was John Deere from Cary, North Carolina, and we were just, it was listening. We were getting yelled at, but we were listening. I've had them in remote locations of Oklahoma, and they just showed up just to listen, both from the tribes themselves, tribal leaders, and the individual indigenous operators.
Okay, and I think that leads into, Chad, if you're a smaller, because we do have a gap on the qualifications for those subsistence operators, which we do have a lot of them in the West, how do you qualify? I mean, that's another thing I know in the financing, and that's not an easy question. I mean, we've done these first Zoom calls about interest rates and how to manage money, and hoping that, we can move producers to being able to qualify. But, the real world banking system is tough sometimes on these producers.
It is incredibly tough. And like I said, I am not the financing expert. What we are committed to do is running through every program as possible that comes our way. So we've had approvals. We don't have a template yet that we can say, here's your situation and here's the path that you need to take. We've had nonprofits that are sitting on reservation that have been approved. We've had schools that are not anywhere on reservation land, off land, be approved. We've had operators that are native, that are in counties, right? They don't actually have, they don't have property yet. They've been approved. But what we've committed is to run through as many programs are brought to us, or in many situations are brought to us, and try to utilize our reach and who we know to try to come up with a solution to get that operator the equipment that they need, and get a situation that they're able to utilize that as a tool for their growth, right? So we don't want to just provide a piece of equipment and then walk away, or provide the wrong piece of equipment. when hemp first came on the market there and a lot of the tribes were jumping into hemp, we had a lot of calls about getting these big combines. I was like, well, how many acres you got? Well, we got 10 acres. You don't know. That's not, that's way overkill. That's not what you guys need. I know it sounds cool and it's a big machine, but that's not what you need. That's not what's going to help you produce, what is going to help you either create income, revenue, create jobs, economic development, whatever that may be. That's what we're wanting to do. So some of those questions, I might not know, but we're willing to chase it up the flag as much as we can and see what we can do to find a solution that would work. And that's our existence, right? Our existence is not to, if somebody says no, that's great. We just look for the next option. That's kind of how we look at it. Whereas I think maybe some of the traditional brick and mortar dealers, it was a no from John Deere Financial, and then it would just kind of die away. We want to feel that we're in the trenches together with the operators and we're fighting to figure out a way to make this work. That's our existence.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll let you move on with your PowerPoint.
Okay. That was it.
Questions. I think the biggest thing, Chad, and I know just from, my family's operations, it's hard right now because of the equipment being available. But like you said, it's nice. You want to sit in them, you want to drive in them. But with your location being where it is, do you just go to your local dealership and sit in them and drive? How are you able to test drive those tractors to know if
that is a very good question. With us being, sometimes I say we're a tool in the toolbox of John Deere. We have access to every single dealer across the country. That's one option, right? So you can walk in. Matter of fact, our contract is actually listed. It's in John Deere quotes, which I thought was kind of cool, but that John Deere actually has a pricing schedule that's called the Native American Small Business Set Aside in the John Deere system. So I can walk into a John Deere dealer in Dubai in the Middle East, and I can pull my contract and actually see that name, Native American Small Business Set Aside. That was kind of cool. But yes, any dealer, that is one thing. We also, because of our connections with all the dealers around the country, we move equipment around the country a lot. Just because that dealer doesn't have something. We had a windrower. That local dealer, matter of fact, had never sold a windrower. They didn't have one on the market. We grabbed one from 100 miles away and were able to pull it into them for their program, for them to actually test it. It was a demo unit. So we do demos a lot. Again, we will come to you. We may bring a couple machines out and say, hey, kick the tires. What do you think? So that is part of our, as kind of what we look to do, is to bring the equipment to you as a secondary or as another option if you can't get out to the dealer, right? And it can be any dealer. And so the only thing is we do ask that even though we work with all 350, we don't work with every single dealership employee that's in there. If you would like to reach out to us and we can set something up, and it would be a great event for you just to show up and see what they have to offer. I had a conversation with a tribe last Friday, and they made the comment. He goes, I don't know what you said to the dealer. He goes, but we've never had that much attention in our life before walking into that dealership. And I go, well, we haven't worked with that dealer as much as some of the other ones in the area. And they just had to understand our program and how it worked in John Deere speak, how it worked in the John Deere, how they get credit and how the money's paid, all those type of things. So we just had to walk them through that. So that's why, reach out to us. Is there a machine? Hey, if you're driving by, say, hey, I'm at, I don't know, Jen's on the call, and you were up in Oregon, right? And you popped into a dealership and just was talking to them just to introduce ourselves. So we do a lot of that, but it's, we can bring it to you. We can set up demos. We can have you come into a dealership anywhere, sit in it, drive it, kick the tires. The whole goal is to remove that remoteness. Now, again, equipment availability is tough, but we will have, hey, maybe I'm looking for a new 5 Series. You're going to have one coming in. Okay, I've got one coming in 2 weeks at this location. I've got one coming in a month at this location. So we can work with you to get access to that machine.
Perfect. Do we have any other questions?
So we have a couple more screens here with the QR codes. I think we've got some social media platforms as well as our contact information, and then that's a picture of my daughter and my father who were actually up at a I don't think this, no, this is actually his farm. So that's the picture that they were out at while they were visiting a tribe last week in their production. But we threw that on there, so that's a new picture. So it is kind of a family business that we've got everybody involved.
Okay, Chad, and we did have a question about your QR code on how to get registered for the toolbox. So I told them to take a picture of the QR code.
Yes.
And I do believe one of your colleagues posted the link in the chat.
Yes, ma'am. I posted a link in the chat. If anybody would like to, you can either click on the direct link or whenever, Chad, if you want to go back to that last screen for the contact, how you use a QR code is you can pull out your cell phone and pull up your camera, just like you're going to take a picture of the screen, and your camera on your phone will automatically recognize it and redirect your cell phone to either import Chad's contact information into your phone, or it'll redirect you to the social media links. But this QR code that's up right now, if you put your camera on that, it'll bring you to the registration link to where we can enter you in to win.